Hey Cake Chums, and welcome back to another video. Now, as you can probably hear, my voice is still a little bit ropey this week, so once again it was a bit touch and go as to whether we would have a video this week. But luckily I remembered that I filmed a little demonstration for the Cake Fiesta Manila event a few weeks ago that I thought I'd share with you guys here as well. Now, if you don't already know, Cake Fiesta Manila was a cake show that was launched in 2019, and it was the Philippines' first ever international cake show, as well as being the largest cake show in Asia. Now, like most other events this year, they took the show online, and I was absolutely thrilled to be able to contribute a live demonstration, and I'm just as excited to be able to share it with you guys here today as well. If you'd like some more information on Cake Fiesta Manila, you can head down to the video description where I'll post all of the links that you need. But without much further ado, let's get to the video. Hey guys, and welcome to the Mr. Baker's Cakes kitchen. In my demonstration today, I'm going to be showing you how to make a brand new recipe for gingerbread cupcakes, and then we're going to decorate them in two different ways. First of all, we're going to keep things super simple and just top them with a delicious vanilla buttercream, and of course, a real gingerbread man. But if you fancy taking on something a little bit more challenging, why not have a go at my decorative gingerbread men cake toppers as well? As I say, I'm going to take you through how to bake your cupcakes and how to create all of those decorations in my demonstration today. So if that sounds like something you'd like to learn how to do, stay tuned. Now, if you haven't come across me before, my name is Rob, also known as Mr. Baker, and I'm the guy behind Mr. Baker's Cakes. I'm a bit of a writer, a bit of a video creator, and I'm also the host of the Kenwood Kids Club, where I create weekly child-friendly baking recipes over on our YouTube channel. If you'd like some more information about that, I'll make sure we pop it down in the comments for you. And did I mention I'm also a primary school teacher too? So if your budding bakers and keen cooks are watching today, don't worry, they're in really good hands. Now, we've got a lot to do in today's demonstration, so I suggest we don't waste any more time and we best get cracking. The first thing we're going to do is bake our gingerbread cupcakes, and we're going to be starting those with a very basic cupcake mix that you can use for a whole host of different flavours. It essentially starts with just the usual basics of butter, sugar, flour and eggs, and then we're going to add in some of those essential gingerbread flavourings to make cupcakes that pretty much taste like gingerbread men. If you fancy baking along with me, then you'll need to start with 175 grams of butter, and this is at room temperature. I'm going to pop that into the bowl of my stand mixer, and I'm just going to run the mixer until that's nice, soft, loose and pale in colour. If you don't have a stand mixer, don't worry, you can do this just with a bowl and a spoon. It will just take a little bit longer. After you've been running your mixer, or stirring by hand of course, for a little while, you should find that your butter has gone a really nice pale yellow colour. And when that's happened, it's time to add in your sugar. Now, I like to bake with golden caster sugar because I find it has a slightly richer, more molassesy flavour than normal white caster sugar. But if you can't get hold of golden caster sugar, white would do just fine. I'm going to pop that in with that butter and then turn the mixer back on again until they're fully incorporated, light and fluffy. Now, I don't think I actually mentioned it, but that was also 175 grams of the sugar, and all of our measurements for this basic cupcake mix are in fact 175 grams. So that's your butter, your sugar and your self-raising flour. Next though, we're going to go in with 3 eggs, and I'm using large eggs today. I'm going to begin by cracking those into a bowl, just because that way, if I drop any shell into the mix, I can scoop it out and it's not going to end up in with my cupcakes. I do have a bin down there, by the way. I'm not just throwing these on the floor. Give those a little muddle together with a fork. And then we can start adding it to our butter and sugar mixture a little bit at a time. If you find that your mixture looks like it's starting to split slightly, you can add a spoon of your flour and that will just help bind everything back together. But if you do this on a nice slow speed and add the egg nice and slowly too, you shouldn't find that you have any problems. Last up, we're going to add in that self-raising flour, and again, that's 175 grams. We're also at this stage going to add in 1 teaspoon of cinnamon and 2 teaspoons of ginger. Both of those are ground. And we're also going to add in 1 tablespoon of black treacle, which I believe is also known as molasses. Now this can be very sticky to work with, so you might need to wash your hands after doing this. The combination of those spices and that treacle is going to give us that rich, spicy gingerbread taste that we all know and love so well. So for the last time, I'm just going to pop the mixer back on and let all of those ingredients come together. Now you don't want to leave your mixer running too long once you've added that flour, because otherwise you can start to overbeat it, and what that will do is activate the gluten in your flour and it will make your dough very dense and quite bready. We want our cakes to be nice and light and fluffy. So as soon as I can't see any flour at all, I'm going to stop the mixer and then switch to a spatula just to whiz around the edges and make sure all of those ingredients are fully combined. It's looking pretty good to me and it smells absolutely amazing. Now, once we get to this stage, it's time to prepare our cupcake cases. So, you will need a muffin tin, and I've got a 12-hole muffin tin here. A muffin tin is slightly deeper than a normal cupcake tray, but it means that you can get nice, decent-sized cupcakes. I've also got slightly deeper muffin cases as well, and I'm just going to pop one in each hole on my tray. Now to portion out my cupcake mix, I like to use a large ice cream scoop because it means that I can make sure I put the same amount inside each cupcake. That will help me get lots and lots of even bakes. I just take 1 scoop of mix, make sure it's nice and level and full, and then pop it into each case, just like that. Hopefully you should find that this amount of mixture will be the exact right amount to fill our 12 cupcake cases. Now to get that last one, we're going to need to scrape the bowl, because as I say, we don't like waste in the Mr. Baker's Cakes kitchen, so we make sure we have exactly the right amount of mix. So I'm just scraping around the bowl, getting any loose bits of cake mix left, popping them in that scoop, and then that should give us that last cupcake. Now once you get to this stage, your cupcakes need to go into a preheated oven at about 150 degrees fan for about 27 minutes. Now that might sound like quite a long bake time for cupcakes, but what we're doing is we're baking them at quite a low temperature for a long amount of time. That will ensure that they cook really slowly and really evenly, and they won't rise too much in the centre, giving us a beautifully flat cupcake ready for decorating. So I'm going to go and pop mine in the oven, and then we're going to make our buttercream topping. I'll see you in a second. While our cupcakes are in the oven, we're going to get on with making our vanilla buttercream, and this is just a really simple, I think it's an American style buttercream. Essentially it's just butter, icing sugar and a bit of flavouring. And just like with the cupcakes, we're going to start by creaming our butter, which again is room temperature, ready to use. We're going to cream that until it's nice and pale and soft and light again. And so, once again, just like with the cake mix, hopefully your butter should end up a nice pale colour like mine has here. And then what we can start doing is sifting in our icing sugar. So I'm going to do mine half at a time, and I'm just placing that, maybe a bit more, into the sieve. And then in a hope that it won't go everywhere, I'm going to stir it around with a spoon rather than shaking it to get it to fall down into the bowl. Don't you dare drip. Now I am going to add this full recipe over on my website, by the way, so if you do fancy having a go, you can head to my website, which is blog.mrbakerscakes.co.uk. And it will be going live there today, hopefully if I've remembered first thing this morning. And it will have the recipe for the cupcakes and for the buttercream. But essentially the buttercream is just 2 parts icing sugar to 1 part butter. And in this case I've used 250 grams of slightly salted butter and 500 grams of icing sugar. That will probably make slightly more buttercream than we need, but I'd rather have too much than not enough. It's nothing worse than running out of buttercream when you get to that last cupcake. Now I'm starting on a really low speed on the mixer so that the icing sugar doesn't just go whoosh and I end up covered in it. Of course, if you have one of those covers on your mixer, which I do have somewhere, you can use that as well. But by staying on a really low speed until it's a bit more incorporated, you should find it doesn't go quite so mad. Now I'm a firm believer in not over beating your buttercream. I prefer to do it a little bit, leave it, go back and do it again. So if I take my red spatula this time, scrape that bit off there. Again, hopefully you can see that all that icing sugar has been thoroughly mixed in, and that means we can go in with the rest. Pouring it into that sieve, trying not to wear as much of it as I am. Giving it a stir around to help it through the sieve. And this time I'm also going to add in my flavouring as well. Now we're making vanilla buttercream today, so I'm going to be using vanilla bean paste. I like using the paste or fresh vanilla because it means you get those little specks all the way through the buttercream. But you can of course use vanilla extract or in a pinch vanilla flavouring, but I do prefer the real stuff. I think I'm running out though. So for this much buttercream, you want about a tablespoon of your vanilla bean paste or your vanilla extract. I'm going to pop this back onto the mixer, pop the top down again, and again starting really slowly so we don't go everywhere. We're kind of going a bit everywhere, not totally everywhere. And then again, once it started to come together, I can increase that speed slightly until everything is fully combined. If you find that your buttercream mixture is looking a little bit thick, you can add a tablespoon of cooled boiled water, and that will just help loosen it up slightly without affecting its shelf life at all. But essentially, that is how to make our buttercream. So again, if I grab my spatula, scrape off my beater, whoops a daisy. I am quite messy if you noticed. Hopefully you're not as messy as I am. Okay, and again, if I show you that, hopefully you can see that we've ended up with a really nice pale vanilla buttercream with those nice vanilla seeds speckled throughout it. Now this is quite stiff, so what I am going to do is just add that tablespoon of water that I mentioned, give it another quick beat, and then I'm going to cover it with cling film and set it aside until later on when I'm ready to use it. And then once I've done that, it will be time to make our decorations. This is probably the bit I'm most excited about. Okay, I'm going to sit down for this bit because we're going to be a little bit more hands-on now because it's time to create our decorated toppers. Now, I'm going to take you through all the equipment that I'm going to be using today, but if there's any bits and pieces you don't have, then don't panic too much. You can do essentially pretty much everything I'm going to do with a cocktail stick or a toothpick. So don't panic if there is anything you don't have. I'm just going to show you kind of like the Rolls-Royce model of the tools and resources you would use if you have them. Okay, so first things first, icing to make our toppers. I'm going to be using this multi-pack from a company called Renshaw. Now this pack has 5 different colours of icing in, including 3 of the 4 colours that we're going to need to use. We're going to be using the black, we're going to be using the teddy bear brown, and we're going to be using the white from this packet. And then I have a separate packet over here of red, which we're going to be using for the gingerbread men's red noses. I've also got 2 powder colours here, which we're going to use to add a little bit of blush and shading. This is Rainbow Dust powder colour in milk chocolate, and this one is Rainbow Dust powder colour in strawberry. I've got a 78mm cookie cutter, and I've also got this oval shaped cookie cutter, which I find really helps me to get a consistent smile on my gingerbread men toppers. But again, if you don't have one of these, you can just freehand it with your modelling tool. It's just nice to have if you've got one. Speaking of modelling tools, I'm going to be using this tool, and this is usually known as the Dresden tool by a company called PME, but lots of other companies make them as well. I've also got this kind of soft rubber or silicone tipped tool that I quite like just to tidy things up. And then I've got a selection of different brushes here that I'm going to be using to brush on water as my glue and to add our dust colours when we get to them. Last but not least, I've got these kind of hemisphere shaped foam cupcake formers, which I'm going to use to build my cupcake toppers on today. Again, if you don't have them, you can use anything that is kind of hemisphere shaped, as long as it is of course nice and clean and food safe. Or you could just of course do flat circles of icing to go on your cupcakes. You don't have to do the dome shaped ones. Okay, so we're going to start today using the teddy bear brown icing, which is kind of like a lovely caramelly colour. And I'm just going to give that a quick knead to get it nice and soft and ready to use. Now when I'm making these gingerbread men cupcakes, I like to do 6 of them with these decorated toppers and 6 of them just with the swirl of buttercream and a real gingerbread man in the top. But it's up to you. You might decide to do all 12 of them with the decorated toppers, or all 12 of them just with the buttercream and gingerbread. That's one of the reasons why I designed this tutorial, to have 2 different options so that you could choose. Today I'm just going to make 2 of these because I don't think you want to sit and watch me do the same thing 12 times. But remember, if you're planning on covering all of your cupcakes with the same decoration today, you will need to do 12. So I've just dabbed my workboard here with a little bit of corn flour or cornstarch. That's just going to stop my icing from sticking as I'm rolling it out. And then I'm using a small rolling pin just to roll it nice and thin. Didn't mention that we needed a rolling pin, did we? Now I'm going to roll this to be about 2mm thick, I think. We want it thick enough that it's going to be strong enough to hold its own shape, but not so thick that it's unpleasant to eat on top of your cupcake. Once we've done that, I'm going to use my round cookie cutter to cut out some circles to go on top of my cupcakes. These cut-offs can be gathered back up and re-rolled to make even more cupcake toppers. Next, it's time for those cupcake formers that you saw me using, and we're going to place one of these circles on top of each one, and that's going to give us the shape that we're after to make the top of our cupcake. Now I'm very gently, just with my hands, helping it lay down nice and neatly over the surface of that dome, and I'm just using that soft part of my hand to make sure I don't leave any finger marks. Take your time with this bit. If you rush, that's when things go wrong. I like to hold mine up in front of my eyes just to make sure it's nice and even as well. And then I can set that aside and do the same thing again. Now once you get to this stage, it's time to grab that other cutter, the oval one, if you have one. We're going to use this to help mark out where we want our big smile to go. Now if you look at one of my finished cupcakes, you'll see that that smile is absolutely huge. It pretty much takes up half of the face. So I'm going to hold that cupcake topper in my hand, take this cutter here, and then just lay the bottom of it across that topper and roll it up until it's about halfway up the face, like that. Do the same thing again on the other one. We want to get them roughly central, but don't panic if they're not perfect. And then hopefully you can see that I've mapped out using that cutter where my smile's going to go. Next, I can switch to my modelling tool and I'm just going to go over that line again, making it a little bit more pronounced or a bit deeper. I also like to use the sharp part of that tool to just poke in a couple of little holes or dimples right at the top of that smile. Now don't be afraid to push down quite hard on these, because you've got that former underneath, the sponge is going to be squishing down as well, so you're not going to push through unless you push really hard. These soft silicone tip tools can be good for this as well, because they can help give you a nice smooth finish. And again, I'm going to do that on the other one as well. And hopefully you can see now we've got two happy smiling smiles. Of course we need to add a little bit more detail to these cupcakes, so I'm going to switch now to my red icing. And we really don't need very much of this at all, because we are just making a couple of tiny little noses. So I'm just going to take a little bit, again give it a bit of a mini knead to get it nice and soft and easy to use. And I'm going to take a small piece, probably even smaller than that actually, and then roll it into a ball. If you push really hard while you're rolling, you'll find that you don't end up with any creases or seams. And then once I've ended up with it in a ball shape, I'm just going to push down slightly and roll it backwards and forwards to turn it more into a sausage. Do that twice so that you've got 2, or 12 if you're making 12. To add those to our cupcake toppers, we're just going to use a tiny little bit of that cooled boiled water again, brush it onto the very centre of the faces, and just place it on so that it's between those two dimples horizontally. Again, don't panic if they're not identical, because of course faces aren't identical. And there you go, hopefully you can see those faces are starting to take shape. So you add the eyes, we're going to switch to black icing, and we need even less of this than we did of the red, because these eyes are absolutely tiny. In fact, to make the eyes, what I normally do is roll it into a sausage, and then I'll cut that sausage in half, so I end up with it even smaller. We want these to kind of be a little bit egg-shaped as well. So roll them into balls and then into sausage shapes, like that. And again, to add them to our cupcakes, we're going to just add a little bit of water above that nose and very gently and carefully place those eyes on. Now I like to use my modelling tool just to kind of move them around until I'm happy with where they are. And you can also push them down a little bit just to make sure that they are completely stuck. And you should end up with a happy smiling face that looks like this one here. Do the same again on the other side. Now the last thing I like to do before I add this white bit at the top here is add my dust colours. The reason for that is because I'm going to pop the white over the top of an area that I've dusted. So I'm going to pop these to one side, and on this piece of kitchen paper here I'm just going to tip out the tiniest amount of my powder colours. Now with powder colours like this, a little does go a very long way, so you don't need very much at all. they can also leave stains on workboards like this one as well. So if you do have one and you're using powder colours like this, I'd recommend that you do it on the kitchen paper, just to make sure you don't leave a mess behind. Don't want anyone to get into trouble. Now with this pink colour here, so the Rainbow Dust Strawberry, I'm just going to take some of that pink powder onto my brush, dust off some of that excess, and then this I'm just going to put above the cheeks by dusting in a circular motion. It's important to take the excess off the brush, otherwise you can end up with a bit too much. You don't want that. I don't know what it is about pink cheeks, but it just makes characters seem so much cuter. Okay, and then once we've done that, we're going to switch to a slightly bigger, more fluffy brush. We're going to use that for the brown. And again, take some of that powder on the brush, dab off the excess on the paper, and with this I'm going to go around the edge of my cupcake just to add a little bit of shading. What that would do is help it look a little bit more 3D. When I'm doing something like this and adding shading to the edge of something, I'll start by just dabbing it around the outside and then running it backwards and forwards until I've gone all the way around. And then once I've done that, I'll dab as much off the brush as I can, and I'll just go around the edges one more time, just moving that brush in circular motions just to kind of soften any patches where I might have been a little bit more heavy-handed. You can also use a slightly flatter brush like this one here with that same brown colour, and again just taking some of the powder on the brush, dusting off the excess, and put that inside the mouth. And again, it's just going to add a little bit of shading, make it look a little bit more 3D. It can be very tempting to want to be quite heavy-handed with these powder colours and want to rush, but do take your time. I promise you it will look much better for it. And then again, going back to that slightly thicker brush that we've taken as much powder off as we can, just going to run that through that mouth as well, just soften that colour. Try not to squish the nose, Mr. B. And there we go, that is pretty much all of it done except for that little swirl of icing on the top. Before we do that, we're going to get rid of these brushes that have got powder colour on them. We're going to get rid of that kitchen paper, and we're going to wash our hands because we want to keep this white looking as white as possible. And I don't know about you, but I've got black icing on my hands, red icing on my hands, and probably even a little bit of powder colour too. And then, as I say, the last thing we need to add to our decorated cupcake toppers is that white swirl of icing across the top. So I've just switched now to the white, ready to roll icing, and I'm going to roll it into a long, thin sausage. Now, if you struggle to roll even sausages with your fingers, you can use an icing smoother like this one here, and just use that to roll across the top. And what that would do is avoid, if I do it wrong first, you can see, it will avoid these kind of fat bits and these thin bits like this. So just roll your smoother across the top of the icing, and you should find you end up with a nice, even sausage. We're going to do this until it's probably somewhere between 1 and 2 millimeters in diameter. When you're happy with how thin it is, we're going to cut it into some short lengths, which are about the same width as the cupcake. But then what we're going to do is kind of make them loop up and down, so they look a bit like a zigzag. That. Now, to attach these to our cupcakes, we're not going to put the water or glue straight onto the top of this time, because that will smear our powder colour that we spent ages adding. So instead, I'm going to take that water or edible glue and put it onto the back of my white zigzag, and then very carefully pop this across the top, but slightly to one side of the head. If I turn it around, you can actually see what I'm doing. We want it to be at quite a jaunty angle, almost like he's got a little hat on, and you should end up with something that looks like that. I'll do it again on the other one as well. So a tiny little bit of water, or edible glue if you prefer. Just brush it onto the back. And then I'll do it this way around as well, as you can see. Lift that up, place it onto the top, and then just very gently pop it into place. Try not to move it around too much, because again, we don't want to smear that powder colour that we've just added. But again, that will give you something that looks like this. And then your decorated toppers are done. Now, ideally you want to leave these to dry for a little while before you try and add them to your cupcakes. I'll normally make these the day before that I need them, so that they can dry overnight. For the cupcakes that we're going to just be putting a buttercream swirl on and popping a gingerbread man in, I'm going to confess something to you. I have bought some gingerbread men this time. But if you would like to make your own gingerbread, if you head to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/MrBakersCakes, you will find I have lots of child-friendly baking recipes, including one for gingerbread. Earlier on in the year, when the UK first went into lockdown, I recorded a YouTube series called Mr. Baker's Cake School, and that's still on my channel as a playlist. So if you search on YouTube for Mr. Baker's Cake School, it should bring up that playlist, and you'll be able to explore all of the lovely child-friendly recipes that I've got there. And of course, you'll be able to make your own gingerbread men. But as for now, I'm going to leave these to dry for just a little bit longer, and then hopefully in a while it will be time to assemble our cupcakes together. I can't wait. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, and once everything is ready, so your cupcakes are nice and cool, your gingerbread men toppers have had a chance to set a little bit, it is time to bring it all together and finish our cupcakes. First thing I'm going to do is put my buttercream back on the stand mixer and just give it one quick final beat, just to make sure everything is nice and loose and easy to use. And then, if we take the beater off, pop that out of the way. What I like to do before I decorate my cupcakes is just give them a nice thin coat over the top of the cake itself, just to seal it in. I think it helps them stay fresher for a bit longer. At least it feels like it does to me anyway. To do that, I take a palette knife, not an offset but a flat one, and I just put some of that buttercream on the top of the cupcake and start pulling it towards the edges. You want to make sure that all of the cake has got some of that buttercream on it. And if you see, by pulling it towards the edge, the paper gives it a really nice, neat finish. Now, because we baked our cupcakes at a low temperature for a longer time, you should find you've got a fairly even flat top to your cupcakes. So this process should hopefully be quite simple. Okay, once you've done that bit, we're going to start by doing our cupcakes that we're just going to pipe and pop a gingerbread man in. So for that, you're going to need a piping bag and what we call an open star tip, which looks like that. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to pop that into the end of the piping bag, and I've just cut a little bit off there so that the tip can come through. And then I'm just going to use I'm going to pop some of this buttercream into the piping bag, and then squeeze it down to the end. Now, I find it easier to control my piping bag if I put an extra twist further down the bag like this, because because it means I'm only then trying to control this much buttercream rather than the whole thing. You might find that quite helpful too. And then to do my swirls, I'm going to start in the middle, go around the outside, and then start to come back up into the middle again to give me that traditional kind of ice cream swirl shape. And then once you've got your swirls on top of your cupcakes like that, we're going to take some little gingerbread men like these ones here, snap off the legs, and then they just get poked in the top. And those ones are ready. Can you see those? For our cupcakes that we're putting our decorated toppers on, we're going to prepare them in exactly the same way, except we're going to put the swirl of icing inside the topper that we've made. If you've let them dry, you should be able to lift them up into your hand, and we're just going to pipe some buttercream in there, and then we can pop the cupcake on top and smush it down. Smush being the professional term. Do this gently because we don't want to damage the cupcake, but you should find that that buttercream spreads out to fill the top of the cake and sticks it into place. You end up with one that looks like this. Let's do that again. Place it onto the cupcake and then gently smooth it into place. And there you have it, guys. Gingerbread cupcakes, 2 ways. Thank you so much for joining me here in the Mr. Baker's Cakes kitchen today for my demonstration for Cake Fiesta Manila, the virtual edition. I do hope you've enjoyed learning how to make my gingerbread cupcakes 2 ways, and of course if you would like to have a go at the recipe yourself, don't forget you can find that over at my website blog.mrbakerscakes.co.uk. If you did enjoy my demonstration today, don't forget you can see more content from me over on YouTube by visiting my channel at youtube.com/mrbakerscakes, and of course don't forget to subscribe to me over on social media as well. You can find me at Mr. Baker's Cakes on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much to Valerie and Christina for inviting me to be a part of Cake Fiesta Manila this year. I've had such a good time, and I do hope that we'll get to do it all over again in person next year. Until then, continue to stay safe, look after yourselves, and of course, a happy Christmas. I'll see you again soon. Bye guys.